Welcome home! The bath is ready. I'm hungry, so the bath will be after. Prepare me dinner. Sure thing. This has been the same old conversation between me and my husband for decades. My name is Karen. I'm a 59-year-old homemaker. I time the preparation of the bath and dinner to coincide with my husband's return from work. Since it's not always clear which he'll want first, I have to have both ready. Hey, bring some tea. When he says that, I simply respond, sure thing, and prepare the tea. I've been living this life for nearly 40 years, so for me, it's just as usual. I got a job right out of high school, met my future husband, who was my boss at the time, and we got married. Being the youngest of 4 siblings with 3 older brothers and with my parents getting on in years, I wanted to get married early to give them some peace of mind. Plus, I was working in an office, but frankly, it wasn't a good fit. As someone with no higher education, I was worried if I could get another job. So, getting married and retiring seemed like the best option for me. When my marriage was settled, my parents were overjoyed and shed tears of happiness. Not long after my daughter was born, they moved into a nursing home, leaving me the family home. I thought my prideful husband would oppose moving into my childhood home, but he figured it was better than renting, so we renovated it and moved in. He hardly did any housework or childcare, but the fact that we raised our daughter comfortably until adulthood is thanks to him. So I thought it was only natural to devote myself to my husband, until I saw that thing. With our daughter married and moved out, it's just the 2 of us in this house now. Our daughter, who lives nearby, checks in on us often, probably out of concern. She says she plans to continue working until she has kids. In our time, it was common for women to quit their jobs when they got married, but it seems times have changed. When I told her how impressive it is that she's doing all the housework for her husband and still working as she always has, she looked puzzled. What are you talking about? We split the housework. Her husband, having lived alone before, can clean, do laundry, and cook. I knew he was capable when it came to work, but didn't expect him to be skilled at housework too. It's quite different from Dad. She laughed as she said that. It seems that her husband, as well as her father-in-law, are good at doing housework. Indeed, a far cry from our household. It was a shock to me, who had always thought it was natural for my husband to not do housework. By the way, Mom, I have a favor to ask. Turns out, she knows someone who runs a housekeeping service and is looking for more staff to expand the business. Mom, why don't you give it a shot? When she asked that, I was taken aback. I hardly have any work experience. I've never worked a day since I got married. Considering my age, I didn't think about working now, but when I heard that many people like me were working, I became a bit interested. All right, I'll go and listen to the details next time. My daughter said that before she left. That night, when my husband came home, I told him about my daughter's visit and the home help service job. He looked at me incredulously and said, "You can't possibly go to work." After a pause, he added, "Karen, I have a business trip the day after tomorrow, so prepare my stuff." Another business trip? You've been having quite a few recently. Can't be helped. It's part of the job. In the past few years, my husband's business trips have become more frequent. He used to never go on them, but now it seems like he's gone at least once a month. And of course, I'm the one who prepares for his trips. I was also preparing for this trip, but due to the bad weather lately, the laundry didn't dry properly. I had forgotten to add one of his spare dress shirts. This had never happened before, and I thought it might be because I was getting old. But I couldn't embarrass my husband, and I thought I might still have time. So, I called my husband, who had already left home. I called his cell phone several times and even sent an email, but there was no response. Then, I realized that he had left his cell phone at home in the bedroom. My husband, who is not very interested in cell phones, occasionally forgets it when he goes to work. He doesn't seem to have much trouble because he doesn't go out much at work, but I suppose it's a different story when he's on a business trip. In a panic, I called his office. The person who answered was one of his subordinates. When I told him that my husband had forgotten something for his business trip and I needed to contact him, he said, "Business trip? Please wait a moment." Which made me wonder. Even though he's a direct subordinate, he doesn't know about his boss's business trip? As I was thinking this, I was told, "I'm sorry, he seems to have gone straight to his business trip destination without stopping by the office." I asked about my husband's business trip destination and his companion, but they said they couldn't disclose that information. I was told something about the company's confidentiality obligation, and I agreed to have them tell my husband about the forgotten item instead. After a while, I heard a car stopping outside, and the doorbell rang. It seemed that my husband had come back home because he had received a call from the office. I apologized to my husband and handed him his dress shirt and cell phone. When I saw my husband off outside, I saw a woman sitting in the driver's seat. I nodded slightly to her, but she ignored me. I watched my husband get into the car with a somewhat unpleasant feeling. My husband returned home 2 days later in the evening. As soon as he came back, he said, "Bath." But I hadn't started heating it yet. There was no notice of his return, so I had no idea when he would be back. Besides, it was earlier than his usual return time. Then my husband became grumpy and said, "Then let's eat first." So I quickly made dinner and served it. As I set the meal before my husband, I asked him, "How was your trip?" However, he barely responded. "You wouldn't understand even if I told you. You've never worked." Words that belittled me seemed to come naturally from his lips. I let out a sigh. Claiming fatigue, my husband finished his meal and went straight to the bath and then the bedroom. Remembering my daughter's conversation, I called her and said, "I want to hear more about the housekeeping service job." For the 40 years since I got married, all I did was household chores and child rearing, so even if I thought about working, I believed I wouldn't be able to do anything. But with a housekeeping job, I might be able to put the 40 years that seemed wasted to good use. With my daughter out of the house and my time alone at home increasing, I also wanted to have a bit more interaction with people. So I decided to give the housekeeping job a shot. My husband was against it, but I obtained his approval by ensuring that I wouldn't be out of the house when he's home and that I would continue to keep the house clean as usual. Once I started working, it felt refreshing to be able to earn money and receive appreciation for doing housework. My daughter used to thank me occasionally, but ever since it became just the two of us, my husband has never said a word of thanks. When he comes home, all he asks for is bath or dinner. And when he's relaxing, just tea. For the first time, I started to resent him. In the past, we used to have more conversations, but at some point, I realized deep down that I was being treated like a housemaid. Once I got used to the job, I was assigned a new client. A woman living alone, she seemed to be slightly younger than me. When I visited the woman's apartment, I felt I had seen her somewhere, but I couldn't remember. The woman left the house after giving me instructions, saying she had work to do. Her room was in chaos due to her busy schedule, so I started by tidying up. As I was cleaning, a photo caught my eye. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman who had hired me was in the photo with my husband. That's when I realized that this woman was the driver when my husband had stopped by the house because he forgot something on his business trip. I couldn't take this photo home, so for now I decided to keep it to myself. With mixed feelings, I finished my job for the day. That night, as soon as my husband came home, he said, "I have a trip tomorrow, so hurry up and prepare for it." "Another trip?" I asked, to which my husband, who seemed grumpy, said, "I can't help it, it's my job. Unlike you, who just get paid for housework, I have a tough job." Is he so determined to look down on me? My resentment towards my husband grew. On the day my husband left for his trip, I steeled myself and entered his room. I had never imagined the day would come when I would suspect my husband of infidelity. And I guess my husband thought the same, because I found evidence of his infidelity quite easily. He had the same photo that I had seen in that woman's house. Inside his drawer, there were numerous photos, and I discovered letters from his mistress. Letters that read things like, "My wife is just a housekeeper. I'm so happy when you tell me you love me." Her name was on them. It confirmed his infidelity. I hastily consulted my daughter. Luckily, it was her day off, and she said she would come immediately. When I told her everything, my daughter was even angrier than me. "What do you want to do, Mom?" she asked. For the first time, I realized I had a choice. So I told my daughter that I wanted to get a divorce. Even though all I know is housekeeping, the fact that my husband called me a mere housekeeper ignited my anger more than it brought me sadness. I was betrayed by the husband I had devoted myself to. With that in mind, I wanted to be away from him as quickly as possible. My daughter offered that if I felt that way, I could move out and live with her. But I felt guilty about involving her husband, and above all, I own this house. I didn't want to leave my husband in this house. But I thought moving out might speed up the divorce, so I started to prepare to move and rent an apartment. My daughter found a lawyer, and I seriously started to take steps toward the divorce. A week later, I consulted with the lawyer, gathered the evidence, and wrote the divorce papers. I brought it up to my husband when he came home. "I want a divorce," I said. He scoffed. "Out of the blue? What will you do after the divorce? You've barely worked a day in your life. You think you can survive on your own?" His words hurt, and holding back tears, I replied, "Even so, it's better than living with someone who's cheating on me." He laughed. "Cheating? What are you talking about? That's not cheating. She's my lover. In other words, she's the main one and you're just the housekeeper. You didn't notice for over 10 years and now you suddenly care? If you hadn't noticed, you could have lived here without a care in the world as a housekeeper. What a pity." He didn't even deny the affair. Was he really this terrible of a person? When I presented him with the divorce papers, he snatched them, filled them out without hesitation, and shoved them back at me. "I'm ready for a divorce anytime. I'll give you until tomorrow. If you're getting a divorce, leave this house," he said, and went to the bathroom. The next morning, for the first time in decades, I broke my routine. I didn't prepare breakfast or lunch for my husband, nor did I wake him up. I left the house early in the morning. He usually wakes up at 7. I left before that and went to a local diner. How refreshing it was, taking breakfast in a sparsely populated diner. The scene before me was so extraordinary, it felt somewhat beautiful. After a while, my cell phone started ringing several times. It was from my husband. Not the type to text, he usually prefers to call. Chances are, if I answer, he'll just end up berating me. Ignoring him, I turned off my phone. After relaxing at the diner, I went to the local office. As soon as the office opened, I filed the divorce papers. While my husband was at work, I decided to go home and pack up my stuff. But surprisingly, my husband was still at home. "Where the hell have you been? It's your fault I'm late. I can't go to work now, so I've said I gotta go to the hospital and take the day off." Well, it's not surprising a man who's never woken up by himself can't do it now. But taking the day off work, just like that, what an idea. I didn't feel like arguing with him, so I just ignored him and started packing. "Ah, so you've decided to leave. From now on, I'll invite her over." Her must be his mistress. Is he planning to kick me out and live here with her? The moment I heard that, I reached my breaking point. "So, you've been making a fool of me all this time. I've already consulted a lawyer. Be prepared, because I will definitely claim compensation for the affair." At this, my husband just laughed. "A lawyer? I can hire a competent one anytime. You don't stand a chance." I was so frustrated being ridiculed like this, I was about to respond. Suddenly, my husband clutched his stomach and crouched down in pain. I wondered what was wrong, but it seemed like he was really in pain. For a moment, I thought of leaving him like that, but if I do, there might be repercussions against me. Seeing him in such pain, I called an ambulance. The ambulance arrived quickly. I answered their questions and watched over my husband. It was decided that he would be transported to the hospital. One of the paramedics looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you should get ready too." But I responded firmly, "I can't. We're strangers now." The paramedic looked puzzled, but perhaps sensing something, they transported my husband without me accompanying him. At that moment, my husband's face was pathetically funny. When I contacted my daughter, she agreed to go to the hospital. It seems my husband will be hospitalized for a while. I only heard that his life was not in danger, but didn't ask for more details. After all, he's a stranger to me now. It'd be a problem if I develop unwanted feelings. I told my daughter, and she understood. While continuing to pack, I found another photo of my husband with his mistress. Shockingly, it was hidden in the living room drawer. In that drawer were our wedding rings, and I couldn't tell if my husband had intentionally left it there or not. But realizing I hadn't noticed it until now, I felt something was wrong with me. At the same time, anger bubbled up within me again. I thought about leaving this house, but I wasn't going to let it end with me just walking away. My husband wasn't around, and I saw this as an opportunity to act. I moved all his belongings to a rented storage unit. Half a month later, when I started living in a new apartment and finished my work for the day, I found my phone filled with missed calls from my husband. As I was about to drop my phone in surprise, another call came through. I reluctantly pressed the answer button. "Hey, where are you right now? Why can't I get into the house?" My husband's voice echoed. It seemed he had been discharged from the hospital and had returned home. I laughed. "Congratulations on your discharge. That's no longer your home, so why don't you go to your mistress's place?" "What do you mean?" he shouted, but I didn't back down. "I sold the house. You seem to be mistaken, but the house was in my name. I can do whatever I want with my belongings, and it's none of your business. Besides, I've graduated from being your housekeeper. We're already divorced, so do whatever you please." Divorce? He must have forgotten about signing the divorce papers half a month ago, or maybe he thought I wouldn't really go through with it. He seemed bewildered, but I hung up. Later, I claimed damages through a lawyer from both my ex-husband and his mistress. My ex-husband had boasted he could easily hire a competent lawyer, but given the evidence and duration of the affair, no lawyer was willing to take a losing case. Thus, I was able to secure a significant sum of money. From what my daughter heard from my ex-husband, his affair was apparently well known within his company, which made sense considering the reactions I got when I called his workplace. In reality, he wasn't on business trips, but vacationing with his mistress. But once the divorce was finalized, my ex-husband became the butt of jokes at his office for being left by his wife and having his house sold off. Apparently, he felt quite uncomfortable. His colleagues and subordinates were heartless. Furthermore, when he went to his mistress's place and she was also asked to pay damages, she complained that this wasn't what she signed up for and left him. How could she say such a thing after getting involved with a married man? My daughter, unable to forgive her father's infidelity, cut off all contact with him afterwards, so I don't know what happened to him. Given his high pride, he might not be able to stand being laughed at work and might have quit the job. He might have moved back to his hometown, which is far away from here. I thought I was powerless. But once housework became my job, I realized the time I'd spent wasn't wasted, and now I'm living a fulfilling life.